Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in to what we're doing here at Gr8terway. And as we're getting started on this particular teaching, I can be honest with you, this might be a one-time message, one-time teaching, but I could honestly see this turning into a series possibly as we talk about the motivations of love. And love is, I don't mean to be cliche here, but love is a very complicated thing, and in the hour of the day that we live in, the chaos, the hecticness of people's lives, sometimes I think love is getting even more complicated, and I can't really say that. I've only lived on this earth for 64 years, so I haven't been here long enough to be able to tell you if it's getting more complicated. But it seems like everything else in our world is getting more complicated, and I can only imagine that our thoughts on love is getting more complicated. I do sit with couples who is wanting to betrothed, wanting to get married. And so we like to sit with couples for some premarital counseling as to what will this marriage look like. And of course, the main thing is they come in, they sit down, and they're holding hands, and they're all in love, and that's the first thing they want you to know. Oh, we love each other. Well, I'm really glad, but I really doubt very seriously if they know what they're talking about. They feel like they're in love, and they are all giddy with each other like they're in love. But love is such a complicated thing, and I often tell couples that, I get excited when people say that they love each other, but I don't buy it. I tell some of my classes, I tell all of my classes where I teach that as I look over anywhere from 25 to 75 kids, I'm saying, I hope all of y'all have a marriage that will last forever. I hope y'all's relationships were made in heaven, so to speak. But the research shows us that over half of y'all will be experiencing a divorce. And the other half that doesn't get a divorce wish they did. And relationships are so complicated and difficult at times. And there are a lot of options in relationships these days. We used to think, oh, Grandma and Grandpa, they kept a marriage together for 72 years before Grandpa finally died, and I just want a marriage like Grandma and Grandpa had because it lasted forever. You know what? Grandma and Grandpa was married in a day where divorce wasn't an option. And Grandma didn't like living with Grandpa any more than some of these wives like living with their husbands now. It's just that Grandma didn't have the options that we have today. And many times people just was grinning and bearing it. And many times they went through a lot of abuse and they went through a lot of difficulties, but they didn't feel like they had the options and they had to stay together. And so let's not get caught in that idea that somehow people didn't struggle in their marriage in the old days. They did. It's just that now we have more options than what they had in those old days. And chances are your marriages today, because you have stayed together, many times is a better marriage because y'all do have options and you chose to stay together. Grandma and Grandpa, they stayed together, but it wasn't because of options. They didn't have any other options, and they was like fighting tooth and nail through the 72 years that they were together. They just didn't have any other choice. So the fact that you are still together and you could bail out at any time, but you're still together, there's a chance that your marriage is doing better than Grandma and Grandpa's was doing. But now we're back to this idea of love and the complications of it and how difficult things can get. And many times we don't even understand our feelings of love that we have for each other. And many times when in marriages or in relationships, when feelings are beginning to change. People don't understand many times the relationship of love that they went into it with, and now they don't understand the relationship of love that they are feeling different about. And so as we talk about this, and I tell couples that are about to get married, I'm saying, you know what, I know you love her. I know you love him. But in 25 years, the love that you feel for her then will make the love that you feel for her now, it won't even look the same. And compared to the way that you're going to love her in 25 years, the way you're going to love him in 25 years, what you feel for each other right now won't even compare. Because by the time y'all get through 25 years, y'all will have gone through peaks, you will have gone through valleys, y'all will have gone through the best of times, you will have gone through the worst of times. You will have developed a level of love with each other at that point that, yeah, I'm glad that y'all feel so strongly about each other right now. But by the time y'all have lived together, grown together, developed together, the love that has developed over a long range of time in a relationship is a love so strong and so deep that you'll look back and say, you know what, I did love her when we got married, but it doesn't even compare with the way I feel about her now. So our feelings about love, and this is kind of what we're looking at, and our motivations of love. I often tell our students, that I see these couples, we talk about it, and here's this young man, and he's saying to her up on Lookout Hill or wherever they're making out or whatever, and he says, I love you. And she says back to him, oh, I love you too. Well, that sounds beautiful and romantic and all the wonderful things that is. But many times the love he felt for her is not the same love that she said to him. And they think they're talking about the same thing. And many times they're not talking about the same thing. Many times she's talking about a conditional love that, yes, I love you if you'll take care of me. And he's talking about a love that says, yes, I love you if you'll have sex with me. And those are two completely different types of love. And we don't understand many times that it takes several years to realize, oh, the love he was talking about for me was not the same love that I was talking about for him. We were on two different pages of feelings, even though we were using the same word, love. How do we begin to understand the aspects and the concepts of this idea of love? Well, we have to take it back to the perfect example of what love is. And throughout Scripture, it says so strong is a love that he would lay down his life for us. And of course, we're talking about Jesus. So in this confusing day of not understanding what love really is, we have to go back to the perfect example of love, and that perfect example is Jesus. So in John chapter 13, these are some pretty familiar passages of Scripture. It says this, Jesus is talking to us. He says, a new commandment I give you, that you should love one another. Now, of course, this love that Jesus is speaking of here isn't the romantic marrying type of love, the eros love, as we would call it, the romantic love, the passionate love. This is the love that we are to have for everybody on the face of the earth, including those that we feel strongly about, but also the stranger that we see on the street. So we talk about this love that Jesus says, a commandment I give you is that you are to love one another as I have loved you. Right here, you remember how your daddy loved your mama? Well, you got to do better than that. you know how your mama loved your daddy, and that's what you grew up watching. Well, I watched how my parents loved each other. Okay, great. And I hope it was good, but you got to do better than that. We are not going to use our parents' love that we grew up watching, the way that mom loved dad, the way that dad loved mom. We are not using that as our example of how to love others. The example we're going to use is the example of Jesus. I love my mom, loved my dad. They're both in heaven, and I thank God for them. But they're not my perfect example of what love is. Jesus Christ is my perfect example of what love is. So it says, I want you, Jesus is telling us, I want you to love one another as I have loved you. There's your example. As I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. So when we talk about this, here's what I want you to pick up on. In our day and time, we all have these wonderful songs that speak of love, a love song. We have our favorite song when it comes on the radio. We have these love songs, and people are singing of their love for one another. And there's so much conversation out there about love is this and love is that. But in 1 John 3:18, John, he calls us little children. He says, my little children, let us not love with word or in tongue. That's basically saying, you know what? It's good that you will give one another some accolades. It's good that you would speak to one another in loving tones. It's good that you say to one another, I love you. But John is saying, but in our speech toward one another, that is not where our love for one another is at. Let us not love in word or in tongue or in speech. Let's not let our love be only lip service. We can't let our love just be simply in the things that we're saying to one another. Let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed. And that means action. That means in our behavior. And in truth. Now, we're going to play into this idea of truth in a little bit. But he says, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in action, in deed, and in truth. Right here, the word truth is what I want you to pay attention to, is what is this truth we're speaking of? I'm going to speak a little further into it later, but I want us to have an understanding of the motivation by which we use the word love. What is your motivation when you use the word love? Now, when my wife and I got together, my first motivation for using the word love was simply because she was hot. And she just tripped my trigger. And it was like straight up probably lust. And I called it love back then. But yeah, there was just a whole lot of physical things going on in my ideas of what I was calling love. But if I understand my motivations, a lot of that was of a physical type of a thing going on. And that's good. I mean, if we're talking marriage people, I mean, there needs to be that kind of hot romance, passion going on. And man, she was so good looking. I remember when she used to walk into church and my heart would just like leap out of my chest. And her good looks was just crazy. And now I was never that good looking guy, but I promise you, 20 something years ago, I was a whole lot better looking then than I am now. And if my wife's love for me was totally based on how good looking I was, well, she's about to run out of that now. And the thing is, that's going to run out for all of us. And we have to know our motivation for love has to be deeper than just the physical looks. Now, obviously, I think I'm talking to a group of people that understands that. But at least we have to start with that conversation, because we need to go into this that says, I know we're going to change. I know we're going to look different. I know that what we're looking at right now over the next 50 years isn't going to look the same. And if we're basing a love off of an eros love, that's the physical stuff, that will play itself out over the years. And if that is the shallowness of the love that you feel for someone special, that's going to play out, and you'll be looking elsewhere. We've got to understand our motivations, the truth. He said, love one another in truth, which means before you can tell someone I love you, you have to understand the motivation that you're feeling by which you're saying that to someone. Where is that? A lot of people just don't understand their motivations in love. They work off of a feeling, they work off of all kind of other ideas in their head, but they never get to the truth of why they say that they're in love. All right, so like I say, people often work from wrong motivations in this idea of how we love one another. So with this going on, we talk about the motivation. We give the impression of love. And in a way, if we're not careful, our loving, I think I had addressed this in a podcast not long ago, but if we're not careful, I love you based on what you do for me. Now, if you're watching this, I want you to take a moment and really consider what I'm saying right now. That if you are saying, or let me say it like this, if you're feeling this towards somebody, I love you for what you do for me, that is not the love of Jesus Christ. And I'm not just talking about marriages, although it applies to marriages, but I'm talking about your children, I'm talking about your coworker, I'm talking about anyone that you're in contact with, that I am only going to love you as long as you are serving my needs. And if we are loving like that, then you are not following the example of love that Jesus Christ gave us. Because Jesus did not love us based on what we can, what can we do for Jesus? Zero, nothing. He's God. And so he loves us far beyond anything we could ever do for him. He loves us, and I think you know these Greek terms, with what we call agape love, which is an unconditional love. His love for us is not dependent on what we can do for him. Now, just in your own relationships, whatever relationship you want to think about, how are you loving this person? Is it dependent on what they are doing for you? I used this example the other day. Again, I'm talking a lot about the classes I teach. And we were in a developmental psychology class, and I actually have parents in that class, little children. And so they was talking about, based on the ideas that we were given in that lecture, but she was saying, this young mother was saying, yes, I love my baby girl. And I said, well, okay, well, I'm sure you do, but do you love her unconditionally? She, oh, well, of course I do. Oh, of course I love my little girl unconditionally. I'm going, no, you don't. And I think I almost offended her. When I said, no, you don't love your little girl unconditionally. And she, whoa. I said, is she your little girl? And she said, well, yes. I said, do you love other children as much as you love your little girl? Well, no, they're not my children. I said, yeah, that's what I mean. You love your child based on the condition that she's your kid. You wouldn't love some other kid like that. So you love her conditionally based on the condition that she is your kid. God wants you to love other children the same way that you would love your own kids. But they're not my kids. Then you love your kids conditionally based on the fact that they are yours. This gets difficult. I don't like other children. But yet God has a love for me that's unconditional. Your children do something for you based on the fact that they are yours. They make me feel good about me being a mama. They make me feel good about being a dad. They do something for me getting to be their parent. Well, now God is saying, I'm glad you love your children. Now, that little child that doesn't have a good parent, that child that is neglected, that child that does not have a good sense of nurturing, that child that comes to Sunday school class on a church bus, but they're there by themselves and they don't have anybody to love and hug on them. This child that is very lonely, love that kid like they're yours. And there's your agape love. That's not based on them being their mine, so I love them more. No, they're God's, so I'm going to love them like God would love them. And this is what we're talking about here is too often, I love my wife, and even to this day, I love her to be with me in public places, hanging on my arm, because she is still eye candy. And I love the fact that she can turn somebody's head, and I'm going, that's right, she's mine. That love isn't about her. That love is about me feeling good that she's with me. That's all about Kenny. And God is saying, what if she gained 500 pounds? Would you be so quick to call her eye candy then? No, I'd probably want her to stay at the house then. And God is saying, then that's a conditional love. That's a conditional love. I could go on talking about, so often we talk about how we love each other, but the truth is, what we're really feeling is how that person is doing something for us to make us feel this way, more than an unconditional love of how we can pour into their life if we don't get anything back. And so with this idea, okay, when we talk about love in the truth, and if I can bear time here, we talk about, he says, love us, or love in truth. My first thought when I read that today, again, in many counseling sessions over the years, I've heard one spouse say to another, well, truth is, this is just the way I am. If she's going to love me, she's just going to have to love me the way I am. That's just how I am, and I'm not affectionate. If she's going to love me, she's going to have to love me that way. Or I know I cuss her out, but if she loves, that's just who I am, and that's just who I am. Well, I know I've hit her a couple of times, but that's just how I express myself, and that she just has to accept that's how I am. People say that like, well, the truth is, that's just how I am, and that's just, and I'm not going to change because I'm just who I am. If we're basing ourselves on a love of Jesus Christ, you can't be in love with Jesus Christ without you being willing to change. Because we are all supposed to be becoming more like Christ. And we are not going to, well, the truth is, this is just the way I am, and I can't do anything different. If you're in love with Jesus, you got to say, you know what? I've been this way a long time, but I love Jesus so much, I want to change every day to be more like him. And I don't like the way I've treated you. I don't, and I'm talking marriages, but I'm not talking marriages. This could be people at work. This could be people you meet on the street. I just don't like the way I'm mean to people. And if I love Jesus, even if I don't know you, I know Jesus and I love Jesus. And based on the fact that I love Jesus, I want to change that I'm not treating people, if I know them or not. I don't want to treat people that way anymore. I don't want to come across as that mean person that I've been, because I love Jesus so much that I know Jesus wouldn't treat them like that. And I want to grow to the place that I treat people more like Jesus would. And so we're not talking about a truth of, well, this is just how I am and that's the way I'm going to be. No, when Jesus or John is telling us here in the book of 1 John, he says to love people in truth, it's a divine love. And when we talk about this divine love, and basically the Greek word is aletheia, and it's talking about a divine truth. Not a truth based on your tradition. Well, this is how my dad was, and that's how his dad was before him. Well, this is, okay, maybe that's a truth of how your dad was and your mom was and your whole ancestral tree was. And maybe that's a truth for your family tree, but it's not a divine truth. Because what we're wanting to do is not love people in the truth of who I am in the flesh, but I want to love people in the truth of who Jesus is in me. And so I want to love people the way this John's telling us here, in a divine truth, in practice in accordance with the gospel truth, to love one another in the divine truth of what Jesus intends. Jesus tells us in John 14:6, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That word truth right now is the same word aletheia. I am the divine truth. We are not going to align our life with a truth of how my family was in the past, or the truth of what my personality is like, or the truth of I've had a bad day. You know what? I can have a bad day, come home and be all mad and make my wife feel bad and all this stuff. And, well, the truth is I just had a bad day. Yeah, well, I'm not going to love her according to the truth of what happened to me today. I'm going to keep loving her according to the divine truth that Jesus told me to love people with. No matter what other truths are out there, no matter what background I've come from, no matter what personality I have, I am aligning my life with the divine truth, the aletheia of truth, that I am going to love people the way Jesus loves people. All right, I want you to recognize something here, and it says this in chapter 13. I'm in John. I've got some folks here helping me. Brandy, how long have we been going with this now? 27 minutes. I'm going to try to make this happen within the next 10 minutes or so, because there's some important points here. But I want us to see something in John chapter 13 and verse 1. I want us to recognize what's going on at this point in Jesus' earthly existence. He's at the end of his run. He is like right there on the cusp of the cross, on the cross. He is like right there. His time on earth is just about over. He's just about to go to the cross. He's understanding what is in his very near future, like in the next day and a half. He is going to be going through the worst of situations ever that a human being's ever gone through. And so this is the time period. This is what he's dealing with. And in John 13, it says this in verse 1. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he would depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them. I just caught this today. Like, I've read it a million times. I just caught this today. He loved them till the end. Right here, going into his worst hour, he loved them to the end. The first thing I thought of is priorities. And with that said, sometimes in our life, I apply this a lot to my marriage. I could apply this a lot to my children. My children are all grown now, but I love my kids. But right now, something else is too pressing for me to really pay attention to my kids. I know they want to go out and play ball with me, but right now I've got other pressing issues. I've had a hard day at work. I've had this going on. I've had that going on. Or it could be I'm in an exciting point in my life that, yeah, I've got my kids and they're here, but I've taken them for granted. And actually my next hunting trip or my next golf game or whatever I'm into, that has a priority in my life. And my kids have to take a back burner right now because there's something either good that I really like is happening or something is really bad happening in my life and I'm totally distracted and I'm not loving my kids. I'm not loving my wife. I'm not whoever you want to talk about right here. They are no longer a priority because I've got other pressing issues going on. Jesus, even though he had the cross in his very near future, he loved the disciples at that point as deeply as there was never a day in his relationship with the disciples that his love for them experienced inconsistency. He was the same with them. The first day they met Peter on the shore saying, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." He showed his disciples a consistent love all the way through to the very end. And he loved them the same way at the end as he did when he first met them. Oh, I wish I could say that about my wife. When I first met her, I told you, my heart was just thumping out of my chest. And it's like I can't spend a minute out of her embrace. But as we've lived our lives together now, when she shows up around me now, I just kind of look up at her and say, "What's for dinner?" I don't show her the same consistency in my love that is an agape love. Now, don't get me wrong. I know we are going to move through different seasons, different phases of love, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying we have to have our heart beating out of our chest like butterflies in our stomach like a bunch of teenagers all the time. But I do believe that even though there's going to be different seasons of love, at no point in time will people ever be able to say about you, "I was never her priority." I was never. Let me back up. I want to say this differently. I want them to be able to say to you, "There was never a time I wasn't their priority." I've lived with them at the beginning. I've lived with them in the middle. I'm living with them at the end. And I can say, no matter what we went through, I always felt like I was a priority in their life. That's how we love like Jesus. And I know it's going to be looking different as opposed to a coworker versus a wife or our children. You'll have to kind of figure out what relationships we're talking about here. But whatever it is, people know they are consistent in the way they love me. And they can go through a bad day and I'm still a priority. They're going through other things that's very exciting to them, but in their excitement for these other things, they are including me in it. I've never felt left out of the things they're excited about. They always included me in the things that they're excited. I never felt left out because right now he or she has got more exciting things than me going on. No, they've got exciting things going on, but I never felt left out of what was happening in their life. That he loved them to the end. He showed that same consistency through the whole thing. Here's something, and Brandy, I know I'm running out of time, but I got to say this. The more you're around something, and I'm getting a little psychological here, but the more you're around something, the more you take it for granted. I hate that about us. It's a tendency that the brain pulls that if you're around me enough, I'm going to stop giving you attention. And then I'm going to focus on other things that's newer in my life. Things that are not as consistent, that's the stuff I focus on. The things that are completely consistent in my life, they're always there. Those are the things that I give what we call inattentional blindness. I know they're there, but I'm blind to them. Too many of our marriages, because we've been together day after day after day after day, we start treating one another with inattentional blindness that, I might have even said this on a podcast, but at my house I have a reading lamp. It was there today, I think. I don't really remember if I saw it or not, but it's always there, so I'm sure it was there. I'm sure it's there. I mean, it's always there. But did I really pay attention? No, I didn't really pay attention to it. I just know it's there because it always is. Well, that's a reading lamp, and that's fine. But if you had that same attitude toward a wife, well, did I see my wife today? Well, can't really remember if I saw her today or not. Well, I'm sure she was there because she's always there. But I don't really remember focusing on her. That's inattentional blindness. The only time that we pay attention to them is when they're not there. Oh, well, she was here. Well, now she's gone. All of her stuff's packed up and she moved out. Well, what happened to her? Don't let this happen to your relationships, that the only time that you're paying attention to this person in relationship is when they're not there anymore. Jesus paid attention. He was in connection with his disciples, even on this truly difficult day that he knew the cross was coming up. But in spite of that, he still had attention for his disciples. Here's what I want you to pick up on. And I want you to see this. It says he loved them to the end. I know I'm speaking of my marriage quite a bit today. You could, again, apply this to your co-workers, apply this to whoever you want to apply this to. When my wife and I got together, when we first started dating, I didn't think she had any flaws. She was perfect. She's sitting over here. I better say she's still perfect. And she is. She thought I was perfect. Man, she thought I never made mistakes. It took about a week and a half for her to discover that ain't the truth. But you know what? Even though she said, oh, well, he has shortcomings. Oh, well, he has some flaws. She always showed me the same consistency in love in spite of what she knew about me now. Oh, it's easy to have this consistency in love for somebody that never has a flaw and they're always perfect. But if you think there's anybody perfect out there, that's people you don't live with. Because if you spend any time with them at all, it's going to come straight up. You're going to say, oh, there are some things there that I didn't recognize going in. Jesus called Judas to be a disciple. Now, obviously, Jesus is Jesus, and he knew from the beginning what Judas was about. But I'm going to still use this as an example, because at this particular time, it says this, that he loved his disciples to the end. He loved Judas to the end in spite of what Judas was capable of doing. It says, the supper being ended, this is in John 13 and verse 2. The supper being ended, the devil, having already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus. I mean, Judas was already set up to betray Jesus, but Jesus still loved Judas. In spite of that shortcoming, in spite of those flaws, Jesus loved Judas the same way he did at the beginning of the relationship. I want you to see this, and we're going to kind of close. It said, now I'm going to go to verse 4, that even though Judas was about to betray Jesus, it said in verse 4 that Jesus rose from the supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. After that, he poured water in a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel with which he was girded. Here's a man like in the next 48 hours is going to be hanging on a cross, and he's washing disciples' feet. In the next few hours, he's going to go through the worst, torturous things that a person has ever had to deal with. But in spite of that, he took the time right here to show through his deeds, through his actions, a divine truth of love that no matter what I'm going to go through, I'm taking time right now to spend with you, to serve you. How could he do that? I mean, and then, so these other disciples, but how could he wash Judas's feet? Knowing what Judas is about to, knowing what Judas is about to do. All right, I skipped to verse 3, and I'm gonna show you verse 3, and then we're going to close. But it says this in verse 3. How could Jesus show a divine truth of love to his disciples based on what he was about to have to go through on the cross, but he still made the disciples a priority, knowing that Judas was flawed and that he was about to stab him in the back, but yet Jesus still washed his feet. He still showed him a divine truth of love. How could he do this? I'm going to read this to you because the same way Jesus was able to do it is the same way you're going to be able to do it. And it says this in verse 3. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, because he knew those three things. I want you to count them. He knew that God had given him all things. He knew that he had come from God. And he knew that he was going back to God. It says that because he knew those three things, he rose from the supper and he washed the disciples' feet. Here's what I want you to know about that and how you apply it to your life. I want you to see this. You're blessed. If you know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, you're blessed. And God's blessings, he's put all things in your hands. Think of the incredible, I was telling this again to my wife just today, maybe. I'm too blessed. I mean, I don't deserve what God has done for me. God has given me. He has put things in my hands. I've got beautiful friends that bless me. I got people that bless me. God has put things in my hands through the blessings that he has given me. Jesus recognized that the Father has given all things into his hands. Well, God has blessed you. He's put things into your hands. And the next thing is that he had come from God. Here's what I want you to recognize. He had come from God. I want you to pick up on this idea that Jesus and God, the Trinity, Jesus is God. But here's how I want you to apply this to your life. You belong to God. You've come from God because you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior. You have been adopted into his family. You belong to God. I don't care how other people treat you. I don't care if your husband treats you mean. You belong to God. I don't care if your kids never call you. You belong to God. I don't care if you got fired from a job that you was loyal to for 23 years. You belong to God. I don't care what is happening in relationships out and around you. Nothing takes away from the fact that you belong to God. You belong. You know how many people today say, I don't belong to anyone. I don't have anyone. I want you to know that you belong. You belong in the family of God. You belong to Jesus Christ, and he paid this huge price for you through his blood so that you could belong to him. You've come from God as an adopted child of the Lord. You're from the Lord. Feel that family tie with Jesus today. You belong. And then the next thing is this. He knew that he had come from God, and he knew he was going back to God. At the end of your life, whatever went right, whatever went wrong, I don't care what's taken place at the end of this, because you know Jesus Christ, you're going to God, and nobody can take that away from you. You are going to God. You are going to spend eternity with him. And no matter what this life looks like for you, you might have been hurt. You might be bitter because of past relationships. You might have been stung by some very hurtful situations. But because you know Jesus Christ, you belong to him. And because you belong to him, you're going to him. And nothing is going to change that. At the end of the day, you're going to God. You're becoming more like Jesus. And so I'm going to close, and I want you to recognize this. I should have found it. Let me see if I can get to it quick enough without spending too much time here. 1 John, I was in 1 John quite a bit, but it says this in chapter 3 and verse 2, Beloved, now ye are children of God. You belong to him. And it is not yet revealed what we shall be, but we do know that when he, Jesus Christ, is revealed, we will be like him. Now, we're not going to be Jesus. We're not going to be a God like Jesus is a God, but we will be like him. I belong to him, and I'm becoming more like him every day. And because I got those three things, I'm blessed, I belong, and I'm becoming, I can love other people in the divine truth. And it doesn't depend on what they're doing for me, because Jesus has already done everything for me. I don't need anything from them for me to be able to love them, because Jesus has loved me enough that I can just love them. I can just love them. I don't have to keep my guard up. Well, I've been hurt in my past. You don't know how I've been hurt. I get it. But Jesus loves you, and you belong to him, and you're becoming like him. You don't have to put up a guard. You don't have to try to protect yourself from hurts. You don't have to try to hide yourself from others. You can serve them in the true divine, let me say it like this, you can love them in the divine truth of God's love and know that God has you. All right, I was all over the place with that today. God bless you as we all learn to love one another in the divine truth of God's love. God bless y'all.